So for those of you who are here that don't have FSHD, or even maybe for some who do, I might just start off with letting you know who FSHD Global are and what we do. So we're a medical research funding organisation specifically dedicated for FSHD research, and we were founded in 2007 by a wonderful man, Australian man, Bill Moss, who's from Sydney, who lives with FSHD. Bill is 71 years old now, 70 years old now, and is still such an active part of this foundation and everything that we do. So I might just start off by acknowledging Bill and his daughter Natalie, who is our chairperson today, because it is their visionary leadership that we can see the benefits from what we've been able to do for our Australian community with FSHD. And as you can tell, I have FSHD myself. I'm loving hearing all of the comments about patient participation and consumer-led partnership, because we really believe that lived experience is a critical part of working together towards therapies and a cure. So I thought I might just add, Penny mentioned about our parliamentary event. This is a big part of what we do. About 4 years ago, when I joined the foundation, we were struck with this wonderful situation where medical research was really advancing for FSHD. We could see that there were therapies on the horizon, which is quite phenomenal, because when I was diagnosed about 14 years ago, I was told there would be nothing in my lifetime, as I'm sure many of you were. That's not true. That we know that there will be therapies. So we're very excited about that. But the issue that we had was a lot of people with FSHD might not have been genetically confirmed to have FSHD. They might not have been seeing a neurologist regularly. They might be a little bit removed from the medical system. And so we're trying to think, how do we solve this problem and attract clinical trials to Australia when, at the time, the registry that was really a research registry only had 43 patients registered and had been running for several years. We partner with other advocacy groups. So Rare Voices Australia had commissioned a report on patient registries. And working with them, they said patient-led registries are a really good solution to engage patients into the research and sort of, industry-ready process. So we were thinking about, well, how do we attract more clinical trials to Australia? How do we bridge the gap? And how do we make sure that research is translating from the benchtop, where the scientists are doing all of this amazing work, right to the bedside, so that patients ultimately benefit from all of the money that is being put into research. So we decided to become an advocacy body for FSHD and look at the medical infrastructure that's needed in Australia to make sure that Australia is not left behind in the search for therapies. And our parliamentary group that we formed a few years ago was actually instrumental to enabling the MRFF CMD call out that happened in 2022 that funded the MCRI trial, because we highlighted to the government that neuromuscular diseases were not being well supported under the MRFF program. So I'd say it's really satisfying to sit here today and see all of the outcomes that are coming from this lobbying, not just from funding we give, but also the messages that we can send to the government. So I'd like to thank MDQ for holding this wonderful event today, but also for being such a great partner to us in being a voice for our patient community to the government and attending our events as well. So as I mentioned, registries are a big gap filler for encouraging industry into the country. We wanted to create a patient-led registry that didn't rely on connection to a neurologist, that wasn't centred in an institution or an academic registry. So I'm just going to introduce to you our new, hopefully, registry. Hopefully.
Introducing Cure FSHD, an innovative data hub specifically for adults and children living with facioscapulohumeral muscular dystrophy. Co-designed and trialed by FSHD patients, the app securely stores patient data in one place. Beyond an e-health record, it's your personal health assistant. Track symptoms, monitor progress, and easily share information with your treating health professionals. The Cure FSHD app helps patients organise their health data and empowers patients to have autonomy over their journey with FSHD. It stores essential data for trial participation, including genetic information, saliva test results, and full-body Springbok MRI scans. Patients can even request the saliva test and Springbok scans directly through the app. We understand FSHD affects more than just muscles. That's why we capture your comprehensive survey responses on quality of life, well-being, and mental health. Get clinical trial ready with ease. As you input data, your passport gets stamped, making it simple to register for trials or research studies. When you join Cure FSHD, you also join the Global Patient Registry Network under Treat NMD, helping us to fast-track therapies and power research. The Cure FSHD app is the ultimate companion for managing life with FSHD.
So that is the new app that we launched in February at our parliamentary event. When I say it's patient-led, it is accessible via a web link, so you can just go onto a website and put in your own data, or you can download the app from the App Store. I'll show you a little bit about that later. But the really exciting thing that no one's excited about a patient registry. I know it doesn't sound exciting, but the really exciting thing that we've launched is this new concept called a clinical trial passport. So this arose, I was sitting around at a scientific conference and one of the clinicians said, we need to make it easy for people. It needs to be a really simple process, like you get a passport to travel the world. You should just get a passport that says, yes, I'm ready for clinical trials, because it's like another language when people ask you, have you done this test or have you done this test? And we've had patients telling us that they literally take a binder of information to medical appointments. So when you have weak arms like we do, that's problematic. So we thought it might be much easier if we had all of that information right at our fingertips in our phone. So these are the components of the clinical trial passport. And as you move through the steps, which is at your own pace, in your own time, and you can re-access the information if there's changes or you need to update anything. And you can upload the results. If you haven't had those tests, you can request them through the app and we refer you through to get the testing done. All the testing is funded by FSHD Global Research Foundation, so there is no out-of-pocket cost to get yourself from clinical diagnosis right through to being clinical trial ready. There are some of the tests that have some funding that's through the hospital or the government systems. But if you have any out-of-pocket costs, that's something that we cover for you, because we know that being trial ready is important to people and we don't want financial situation to stand in your way. We want this to be accessible to all of our population. Probably the most important thing to think about in thinking about being trial ready is not just the existing information that is available. So most of us, as we're diagnosed with a condition, we might have a genetic test to confirm it. But there's a lot more information that's really interesting to our industry partners, so biotech or pharmaceutical companies. And so we also engage with industry partners to say, okay, you've got an FSHD program. What would be useful for you to know for the Australian FSHD population? And if we could provide that to you, would you run a trial in Australia? So that was the first conversation that happened, was probably around 3 years ago, that we started to think about what would be useful. And we started to collect the saliva testing. So some of you here might know about the Peter Jones lab in Reno, Nevada. They provide a free testing service for people with FSHD worldwide that uses just a saliva sample that you send in the mail to their lab, and it tells you your likely FSHD status. And it looks at the methylation around your gene. So not the number of repeats that Anthony had mentioned, but the epigenetic state of your gene, of your DNA. So we know that in FSHD, there are two parts to the disease. There's the genetic, the gene deletions, so the number of D4Z4 repeats, but there's also, particularly the severity can be informed by the methylation. If you have really low methylation, you can often experience a more severe state of disease. Some of the biotechs that are running FSHD programs are actually targeting methylation to rescue the methylation on the gene. So we thought that is not something that's being collected by any, current registries. We asked industry if that would be useful to learn more about, the prevalence of low methylation and understanding, within family trees, how that changes. And they said, absolutely. So we've included that in with the registry. And the other innovative technology that we've adopted is full body MRI scans that use an AI analysis to give you a heat map of your body. And I'll show you a little bit about that later. But this is more than just being in a registry and donating your data to research. This is really set to empower you to take control of your journey with FSHD, to understand your body, to understand what's happening, and to make informed decisions about your future healthcare and even what clinical trials you might decide to undertake. But not only that, it's a little bit different to a traditional registry because you get to keep all of the information that's in there. So when you have your full body MRI scan and Springbok report, you get a copy of it so that you can use that for your NDIS reporting. You can use it to self-advocate, maybe for accommodations at school or in the workplace. And you can also use it to really understand what's happening within your body. So you might have really high levels of asymmetry. So in FSHD, often one side of the body is weaker than the other. And that can lead to problems like a falls risk or, needing better postural support. So having this kind of report can really help you work with your OT or your physio to look at the types of supportive interventions that might be helpful. But what it also does on the broader scale is just being part of a registry like this, you're helping fast track therapies, because I'm going to show you in a minute what we've been using some of the data for and the types of progress that we've made. So this is a depiction of the full body MRI scan that we have. And, this costs around $3,000, just to give you a little bit of context. And, we've got about 3,500 Australians that we believe have FSHD. So it's quite a ambitious project to say that we will fund these scans for all Australians. But what it tells you is a couple of really important muscle metrics. It measures more than this, but these are the two really important aspects that we see patients using in their everyday life and to advocate for better care. Fat infiltration is an indicator of the progress of FSHD. So as the toxic DUX4 protein attacks the muscles, so FSHD is a gain of function disease, as Anthony mentioned. So your body produces a protein that shouldn't be in muscles, and that toxic protein means that the muscles are replaced by fat. And what we're seeing as we're scanning people is the fat is not sort of marbled always like a nice Wagyu steak. Sometimes the fat goes from one end of the muscle to the other, distal to proximal, proximal to distal. Sometimes the fat goes right across the middle of the muscle. And we're learning that where that fat is positioned and how it's positioned in your muscle can have a function that can mean that the same percentage of fat infiltration in a muscle can perform very differently functionally. So we're learning more about how we can measure the progress of the disease and how the pathology that we see in a scan impacts function. And ultimately, the aim of clinical trials is to find a drug that not only improves the muscle on an MRI, but improves the function of that muscle. So that's why this is really important. It also shows us about muscle development. So that's the size of your muscle. And these two things together are really important because we've seen some drug trials fail because they've improved the muscle development but not improved the function of the muscle. So understanding the whole picture is really important. Now, we've spoken a bit today about the FSHD was mentioned. It's, facioscapulohumeral dystrophy. So it's often described as a muscular dystrophy that affects the face, shoulders, and upper arms. But it's my personal mission to get that name either changed or clarified because we know that it's not correct. This is some results. So each of those muscles along the bottom is a muscle that's measured in our full body Springbok scan. And this is our first, I think it's 24 patients that are on this diagram, and they've got a little triangle for upper body muscles, little circle for lower body muscles, and each person has 2 muscles for each little line, right? Because you've got muscles on either side. They are the muscles that are present in the diagram that you see for FSHD. The fat infiltration, the higher the score, the less healthy the muscle, right? So you can see some of those muscles, and these are all clinically diagnosed symptomatic patients that have genetic confirmation of FSHD. Some of those muscles are very low affected and some are quite high. But if we look at the muscles in the body, you can see FSHD is not just those muscles. It really can affect any skeletal muscle through your whole body. So it's quite misunderstood as a disease. And where this really gives us problems is the fact that it's described as such a benign, slowly progressive disease that regulators, government, traditionally have not been very motivated to fund treatment. So capturing this data and having patients volunteer to be part of this registry help us advocate and tell decision makers what the unmet need is in our patient population. Using these Springbok scans, we've also been able to create a disease progression model. So for the first time ever, we can, on a muscle by muscle basis, predict what will happen for each patient, for each muscle over a 6 or 12-month period, and that's using a computerized model. So you really are contributing to research when you're part of this this registry. So as I said, it's available on the app stores. So it's on Apple and Android. It's called Cure FSHD. This is the FSHD Global website, and you can also join it just by clicking the link on the website. It's completely free to join. You can also remove your consent to be part of the registry at any time. So if you join the registry and then decide you no longer want to be part of it, you can exit from the registry, and your data will not continue to be held within the registry. Also, it's probably important to point out, by being part of this registry, you're not obliged to take part in clinical trials. So it's an opt-in basis. If you're considered an eligible participant, so you meet the age, if there's any gender and mobility requirements, you'll be sent a notification as a clinical trial that you might be eligible to apply for. The trial recruitment process is completely separate to this app. So it's just a way to be informed of what's available to you, and then you make your own decision on whether you participate. So we've heard a little bit about clinical trials in FSHD today, so I won't sort of stay on this for too long, but I think it's really important to understand that the drugs that are being developed fall into very different categories, and depending on the category, it comes with a different level of risk if you're a trial participant. And it's something that I really encourage people to start building a little bit of understanding about, because the time will come when a trial is available that you might want to take part in, And being able to weigh up your options on what's right for you is going to be really important. And that's for any disease, not just FSHD. And I thought I'd just show you. So we know there are over 20 biotechs and biopharma companies with active FSHD programs, and many of the FSHD programs also have companies also have a myotonic pipeline as well. What we've done here is just map it out as to how the drugs that are being developed are going to work against FSHD, because as Anthony mentioned, there's a lot of things that happen either at different points within your DNA that influence how FSHD is sort of activated. So what's really good to know is that we're seeing some companies, a couple that have the same approach, but there really is good diversity across the different mechanisms of disease. And I'm not a gambler, but if I was, I really would like to see that there's all of these different options. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, you put a dollar each way on a horse, don't you? So I think it's really exciting to see that there are so many different approaches, but also multiple companies that are pursuing very similar approaches, because it's multiple shots on goal, and odds are one of these will work. So even to get into phase 1 studies, so when you're looking at the second row in, these are companies that are entering phase 1, which means they have done all of the preclinical testing on animal models, and they're now going into human trials. And I will just mention a little pride shout out here, Therapies, which is a biotech that you can see down in the antisense oligo section, actually is a biotech that we created from FSHD Global Research Foundation, because we wanted to have a commercialization pathway for our research. So when we issue a research grant, we issue the first right of refusal for any IP developed to the biotech to make sure that the research isn't getting locked up in a lab and not being progressed due to lack of funding or, commercialization partner. And we're currently in the pre-IND stage, still doing testing on our lead compounds. But there are a few there that are really exciting. I will just mention that Epic Bio is EpiCRISPR biotechnology that Anthony mentioned. We expect them to have their Australian sites announced within the next couple of months. We've got a couple of sites there that we're working on with them. Alte, which is a small molecule up here. Alte also are looking to run their clinical trial in Australia, and we will have news on their sites by the end of this year, which is really exciting. And then obviously Avidity and Dyne and Roche are also companies that we're trying to encourage to open Australian sites and solve some of the barriers that exist for them. So that's just a little bit of a high level look. There are quite a few more companies that, have a stealth program, so they're not publicly disclosing that they have an FSHD program, but, we are in touch with quite a few of those as well. Now, you've already heard about the ARODUX4, the Avidity Fortitude, and I don't think we touched on the Roche Maneuver trial. I will just mention the Roche Maneuver trial is really about looking at muscle growth. So that's quite exciting too. It's not a disease-modifying therapy, but it might still be quite helpful for strength. I also did want to mention that we've got some really important research studies ongoing for FSHD worldwide, and we do have an Australian site now. So the FSHD Clinical Trial Research Network, which is headed up through the University of Rochester, and has multiple trial sites throughout, I think, US, Canada, and I think even a couple of European sites now. Also at the Children's Hospital in Melbourne is a CTRN Move PEDS site, so for the paediatric arm of this study, that was just started this week. So I don't know how many people here might have children with FSHD, but a really important focus of FSHD Global is to make sure that kids aren't left behind in the race to develop therapies. So we're supporting the MOVE-PED study in Melbourne. We're very excited. Ian Woodcock, Katie Duval are just fantastic clinicians that work with FSHD. And we're really excited that they are standing up the MOVE-PED study in Melbourne. So this is a bit of a passion project of mine. So I'm the leader of the Australian working group for a project called Project Mercury. If you've been involved in the Duchenne's community, they had a similar project called Project Hercules, which was a therapeutic accelerator. And so we have copied that idea completely and decided that FSHD really deserves the same attention and approach. And it was founded by the FSHD Society and FSHD Canada, so the American and Canadian patient advocacy groups. And we're working closely with them on this project. And I'll show you all of our partners in a moment. But if you've heard us talk about bringing drugs to market, and like, I'm not a scientist myself and I haven't had a background in this area, I really thought that once we knew a drug worked, that it would just be approved and then it would be available to people. And that's not how it works. There's a whole process that goes into drug development and regulatory approvals, and then a separate process for what we call patient access. So to me, the biggest heartbreak would be if we knew something worked, it was approved by a regulator, but it was so expensive or not available to patients living with the disease. And our dear friends at Save Our Sons, which is the Duchenne's patient advocacy organisation and research funder, sort of our equivalent for Duchenne's, have seen that firsthand. They've funded some really great studies into some interventional therapies for Duchenne's, and those therapies are not available in Australia. And so I think it's really important that as small neuromuscular diseases, we learn from each other, we share information, and they've been so generous in sharing with us their learnings, so of the SMA Foundation actually. So Project Mercury is really looking to build on the learnings from other neuromuscular diseases and looking at how we fast-track therapies and make sure they're available to patients. So our strategy is pretty simple, 3 steps. Increase the number of qualified clinical trial sites globally. So that's the sites that can run the studies. Increase patient engagement in clinical research through patient registries, which you've heard a lot about today. Economic cost modelling and clinician education. So a lot of the economic cost model, we put out a tender to have an economic model developed about 2 years ago, and we're told it was not possible in Australia because the data didn't exist to support the model. So that's been part of our data gathering and how we've built this registry to make sure that we're starting to collect the right information to enable that. And also global collaboration across our stakeholders. So it's a whole group of patients, advocates, industry, so there's biotech and biopharma companies, and clinicians to share and maximise our limited resources and gain new insights, and also ensure sustainability of FSHD therapeutic development across the world. So we're not just interested in our member countries, we're wanting to make sure that this is shared across the world through the World FSHD Alliance. So these are the partner organisations that are part of Project Mercury. So you can see we have representation from Europe through Germany, France, Italy, FSHD Europe, the conglomerate, the Netherlands, and also USA, Canada, and I think this might be Spain down there, and Brazil. I might have missed Brazil's logo, but they're definitely part of it. So we meet twice a year for Project Mercury, and normally the meetings are either in Europe or the USA or Canada. And it's a really exciting and fun project to be part of. I really love it. The Australian Working Group has set our sights. We've sort of started work on forming a strategy to address the 3 goals. So we've completed the development of our Cure FSHD registry. We've completed our disease progression modelling where we've funded through Springbok Analytics the creation of this model. That is now going to be further developed into a platform that can be queried by, if you're designing a clinical trial and you wanted to look at, the best cohort to test your drug in, you'll be able to query the database. Longer term, we're trying to make sure that it can be available to patients under the guide of their clinician, but that's a little way off yet. And the future possibilities is to build that out further into becoming its own digital placebo. So I know it's been mentioned a couple of times already today that muscle biopsies are quite well tolerated. As a patient advocate, I probably do find that statement can be a little bit ambitious, because the patient feedback that I get from patients that have had to take part in a biopsy is not always positive. So I think that we need to constantly, as those patient consumers, tell industry what we want from a clinical trial and what we need. And we are very motivated to see what we can do to eliminate the need for biopsies in clinical trials. But at the moment, know that it's predominantly regulator required. So the TGA and FDA are very hesitant to accept a trial where they cannot see what's happening in the muscle. So, don't come down too hard on our industry partners for still requiring biopsies, because ultimately we want drugs approved. So we need to make sure that the trials are designed in a way that the regulators will accept the data. We're doing some workshops in Australia. We're looking at diagnostics in FSHD. So there's currently a new clinical care guideline being developed that steps out sort of a decision tree pathway for how you should have your diagnosis once you're diagnosed by a doctor in a clinic, confirmed genetics, epigenetics, all the testing that should be done. The global guidelines probably don't consider countries like Australia that are so big and dispersed, and how difficult it can be for patients to get that, the blood-based confirmation. So we're looking at whether it's possible to flip that decision tree and have the saliva testing to confirm diagnosis first. And we will hold a workshop with international and Australian experts to work through that and to develop our own Australian-specific guidelines on diagnostics. We're also looking at hosting a workshop for advanced care planning and palliative care in FSHD. We're acutely aware that in advanced disease stage of FSHD can be really confusing, managing, breathing, sleep, swallowing, and even, the overlays of acute conditions. So you might get COVID or pneumonia. There's no guidelines that exist that help clinicians manage those complications through advanced stage disease and also into palliative care. I'm not speaking about hospice care or care, just to be really clear, like palliative care is something that we consider as, managing a chronic condition that is not stable and that is not treatable. So I know palliative care, the idea of it sometimes is not very palatable, but that's what we're speaking about. But then also looking at, end-of-life care support as well. The advanced care planning and palliative care will be done in consultation and collaboration with FSHD Europe, the European Neuromuscular Centre, do some really fantastic workshops as well. So after we've done our Australian-specific workshops, we'll be doing a workshop with the ENMC on advanced care planning and palliative care for FSHD to also create a globally relevant guideline for advanced care planning. Our hope is that not only will that give us a better clinical care and quality of life for people with FSHD, it will also provide us really necessary evidence on the disease burden in advanced stage disease, which fits into our goal to be able to advocate for drugs to be not only approved but also reimbursed. And then I just thought I would open the floor a little bit to see if anyone has any questions about anything that you've heard today or the registry or our work at FSHD Global.
Does the app that you download, sort of have fairly clear instructions as to what the bouncing ball is, as far as what we need to do?
It should be super clear, but I'm biased because I wrote it. But next week, we actually have a new staff member starting with the foundation. So I don't know if anyone here would know him if they're in the FSHD community, Peter Smith. He's a fairly well-known FSHD community member. He's starting with the foundation and will be helping patients navigate through the Cure FSHD process. If there's any difficulty in uploading information, we can also do it in the back end of the registry as well. So we've had some people that just are not comfortable with, with doing it on their computer, or they might be trying to use it on a phone and it's, a bit more difficult. So we can also receive that information via email and upload it in the back end as well. But it is fairly intuitive. Like it's not a really entertaining app. It's very stepwise, but that's necessary for this. But it is quite intuitive. It's just a point and click kind of. Yep. Alex.
So much. That quality of life data as well. I'm just wondering, because sort of in the research I'm doing with myotonic dystrophy, we're finding that there aren't a lot of tools that have been validated to kind of assess that. What type of tools are there for that in FSHD and how are they developed?
So we're using the Neuromuscular QL questionnaire that is I think the only validated questionnaire-based patient-reported outcome that exists for FSHD. It's a good point you make, though, because we are looking at getting more quality of life measures validated, and we're encouraging the incorporation of them into clinical trials as well, so that we can show, how the drugs improving the lives of patients, not just, helping them go from sitting to standing quicker, because even though it's a really big life goal for all of us, I'm sure we'd actually like to see reduction in pain or fatigue or, mental health. So yeah, a great point. But yeah, we're using the Neuromuscular QOL questionnaire. That's all right. Great. So one little plug from me, it's World FSHD Day on the 20th of June. And this is my little friend Zahara, who is our youth advocate for FSHD. Now, Zahara gets her whole school in on the act to do her little orange slice selfies. It's a great way to raise awareness. The hashtags are World FSHD Day and Save Our Smiles. So please get active. And then I just thought I'd leave you with one thought, and that's, as an FSHD patient myself, I have found it so helpful to get involved with the FSHD community, get involved in research, build connections with people. Muscular Dystrophy Queensland was actually the first organisation that I reached out to when I received my diagnosis. And I don't think I could have got through it without them, to be honest. So whether you choose to engage through, events like this, or fundraising, or, just community involvement, I really encourage you to do that, because we are stronger together. It's true what they say. And it doesn't matter whether you have FSHD or some other neuromuscular disease, we can all understand and empathise with the challenges that we face. So it's really great to see so many people here today. But, if this is your first sort of introduction to Muscular Dystrophy Queensland, I just really encourage you to get as involved as you can, because if not us, like, who is going to stand up and be part of all this? So, and also, of course, feel free to reach out to us at the foundation too. But I really have found it to be beneficial. And now, of course, running FSHD Global, you can tell I like to be in the driver's seat of all of this. But I hope you get a lot of benefit out of it, and I really encourage you to stay engaged.